Chapter 13, The Wind Over the Water. The late autumn wind swept across Lake Michigan, carrying with it a strange warmth that did not match the cold front on the news, and Micah stood at the shoreline while Pastor Daniels prayed quietly behind him, his voice calm but firm as he quoted 2 Thessalonians chapter 3 verse 3, saying that the Lord is faithful, and that he would establish them and keep them from evil. The lake rolled in darker than usual, each wave curling as if listening, and Micah felt the familiar burning behind his eyes, not frightening anymore, but steadying, as though a hand of light rested gently at the back of his neck. Chicago hummed behind them, distant sirens, traffic, snippets of music, life going on unaware that a spiritual tide had shifted beneath their feet, and the boy inhaled deeply, whispering that he was ready, whatever came next. Pastor Daniels placed a steady hand on his shoulder, reminding him that readiness did not mean perfection, only obedience, and as the wind suddenly calmed, Micah sensed that something had just acknowledged him from beyond the veil. Chapter 14, The Calling in the Night. Micah awakened before dawn to a soft knocking, not on the door, but on his spirit, the kind of impression that was not heard with the ears but felt across the chest like a tug, and he rose quietly so as not to wake Mrs. Alvarez, who had let him stay the night. On the small desk was the Bible they had given him when everything began, opened though he had not opened it, resting naturally on Isaiah chapter 42 verse 6, telling of being called in righteousness, given as a covenant and a light to the nations. The words glowed faintly, or maybe it was just the street lamp outside, but Micah knew this was not coincidence. He whispered a prayer he barely understood, asking God where he needed to go, and the answer came not in a voice, but in a sudden, unmistakable memory of an underground CTA station where he had never been but somehow recognized. When he stepped outside, Chicago still half asleep, a sense of mission marched silently with him. Chapter 15, The Hidden Meeting. The underground station on Jackson felt strangely empty for rush hour, almost staged, and Micah walked slowly down the long tiled wall until he saw two figures waiting. Sister Amari from the South Side Prayer Coalition, and an older man he had not met, his face lined with years of faithfulness. Amari greeted Micah with relief, saying she had dreamed of this moment 3 nights in a row, each dream ending with Micah standing exactly where he stood now. The older man introduced himself as Brother Lucas, explaining that he was part of a quiet network of believers who watched the city spiritually, not with fear, but with discernment, and that Micah's arrival had confirmed something they had long suspected, that Chicago's growing unrest was not only political or social, but spiritual in nature. As they talked, the station lights flickered once, as if affirming the gravity of their meeting, and Lucas opened his pocket Bible to Romans chapter 8 verse 31, reminding them that if God was for them, nothing could stand against them. Chapter 16, The Revelation in the Tunnels. They guided Micah deeper into maintenance tunnels not open to the public, places that felt untouched since the 1980s, and the air carried a thick stillness that seemed to press inward like the silence before a storm. Their footsteps echoed against concrete until they reached a chamber where old electrical panels hummed faintly, and Lucas explained that this was one of several spiritual pressure points across Chicago, places where darkness had attempted to anchor influence. Micah felt the burn behind his eyes again, stronger than ever, filling his vision with swirling light that illuminated every rusty pipe and spiderweb in the room, and he gasped as scripture poured into his mind not from memory but from revelation, Psalms chapter 27 verse 1, declaring the Lord as his light and salvation. The chamber trembled softly, dust falling in tiny streams, and Amari prayed boldly while Micah raised his hands, releasing not power of his own, but the authority God had entrusted to him. A burst of warmth spread outward, quiet but absolute, and the oppressive heaviness dissolved like mist under sunlight. Chapter 17, The Night the City Listened. That evening the skies above Chicago turned turbulent again, but unlike before, the lightning branched outward in patterns too symmetrical to dismiss, almost like script etched across the clouds. People across the city paused to look upward, some praying without knowing why, others simply sensing something shifting. Micah stood with Pastor Daniels outside the church, watching the sky swirl, and the pastor told him that sometimes God spoke through storms, referencing Job chapter 37 verse 5, which says God thunders marvelously with his voice. Micah felt none of the old fear, only purpose, and when he closed his eyes he could feel the spiritual landscape of the city like a map made of light and shadow. What once felt overwhelming now felt navigable, and he understood that the unrest that had shaken Chicago for months was beginning to crack. One spark of obedience, one boy's yes, had started a chain reaction that heaven had already prepared. Chapter 18, The Confirmation. The next morning, every news station reported unusual stories, sudden reconciliations within fractured neighborhoods, unexplained moments of peace breaking out during conflicts, strangers helping strangers at a rate that baffled reporters. Chicago felt lighter somehow, as though a weight had been lifted, and Micah sat on the church steps listening to the city breathe differently. Pastor Daniels joined him with a gentle smile, explaining that when God moved, the effects were often subtle at first, blooming over time like seeds in good soil. Micah asked if this meant the battle was over, and Daniels answered carefully, quoting 1 Timothy chapter 6 verse 12, telling him to fight the good fight of faith, which meant the journey would continue, but now he would walk it equipped rather than overwhelmed. Micah looked out over the awakening streets, feeling peace settle into him, a peace that did not erase responsibility but strengthened it. The city still had storms ahead, but now it also had a promise, and that promise had been placed in him.